We are all here because we just finished with our staff meeting, so it made sense for us just to stay here since we wouldn't have time to go back and log on to Zoom, so. We have Nikki, Scott, John, myself, Robert, and Sarah. Then we also have the other Sarah running the Zoom for us, so that's our group, and it looks like we have all 3 finance committee members, so we'll get started. We did cancel our last finance committee meeting, so there's a few things to catch up on. We will be having this one, and we have the one on May 17th still on the calendar as well, because we will have some stuff to talk about at the second council meeting in May as it pertains to budget and finance. So leaving that one on the calendar as well. But we'll start just going through kind of some of the routine stuff. The March 2022 financial statements are included. Go down. So everything's still looking good. I know that we have been watching building permits, and that number was down again by 30% in March. This morning I pulled April's numbers and it was down 27%. So we are still monitoring that. I know Scott's going to go down there this morning and kind of get an overview on what's going on, but we are still watching it. It's just keeps trending in that direction consistently month after month. So I did end up adding the year-to-date comparisons for 2020 per Catherine's request. So those are in there for you to see as well.
Thank you for doing that. It's helpful.
This is looking really good still. Everything's either at or above target and on where we need to be. We still will have budget amendment 4 coming to the next council meeting for the second reading. So once that's approved, we'll get that into the May financial statements.
And then if I can ask, that's going to bring our ending balance down to about 2.1 once those are on. Is that right? If I did my math correctly?
I don't have the exhibit in front of me, but that does sound close. We are looking at a surplus again. If you pull the trends on where the general fund's at revenue and expenditure wise. So I'm still feeling pretty comfortable with where we'll end at the end of the biennium. In aging reports, of course, I include these. Down at the bottom are the April numbers. You can see that the over 120 days has been improving month by month since we started doing shutoffs again. So, back in August, which is the top of this chart, it was 109,000, and as of April, we're down to 68,000. So we are catching up on some of those delinquent accounts, which is good news. Questions on the aging? Kind of long. So low income. So we actually had a person inquire about whether Social Security income should be included on our low income application. So we had 2 legal opinions done, and what we found out is that we should only be including a certain percentage of the Social Security income. It's either 50% or 85% based on a base number that is used by the IRS. So we went through our city code, and the reason that is because we have AGI. So we use adjusted gross income, which you'll see on that page is in section D. So this is our city code, and the red lines are the updates that we worked with our attorney on, just to clean up the code to make it consistent with our current application and make it consistent with the intent of the low income program, which has always been that we include people's Social Security income because it is actually income. So there's very few changes to the code. It was just adding the definition for total yearly household income, which correlates with our application that everybody fills out each year. And then striking the AGI and adding yearly household income in section B. I also included, we did a comparison of the low income program by cities. So that's included in here. Our program is by far the most generous. And we found out we were the only ones that were using adjusted gross income. That's not the norm. Everybody else uses what we're trying to change it to in the city code. So we have the most generous rate reduction of 50%, and we're still using 50% off of a 2010 rate in EMS. So that is, I think it's like $3.74 a month. And we also mark up the federal poverty guidelines to 125%, which we're the only city that does that. The other cities typically just use the standard markup. So wanted to put this in there just to kind of show the intent of bringing this to council isn't to be, increasing our reduction rate or our program qualifications or anything like that. It's strictly just to clean up the adjusted gross income language to make it consistent with what we're trying to do. Questions?
I would add also, as we're going through this, because no one actually knows how we came up with that verbiage, because it's not anyplace else. This is very comparable to what CAP and Grace Harbor PUD does. We've made the decision to anyone that, because of the definition, anyone that was denied because of the scope for this period, it would be this period only, that implied and was denied, that we're going to go ahead and the lower rate. I mean, to get that. Just because we got, we had one lawyer said we're fine, another lawyer said we weren't, and a different thing, and I made the decision we should move forward on going to the, I guess, the more liberal view on it. So the view is not to harm anybody.
Yes. And when we did that, we've actually already fixed it, and it was 5 accounts out of the entire city that got added back onto the program. So very small in scope, but it's something that they should already be seeing those bills when the next round of bills comes out. So it's already been fixed.
And by this period, you mean 2022 to date?
So it would be from whenever they submitted their application to current.
Do they submit an application every year?
Some of them. It depends. I'm not sure if you're talking about the 5 that got added back on or the renewal. Oh, yes. So we have a renewal process.
Okay.
They are required to submit a new application and supporting documentation every year.
Okay, thank you.
My last talking point, we were asked by council to bring back the information on the police station bond. And so we've been meeting quite a bit behind the scenes with our financial advisor, our bond attorney, and we have this list is kind of where we're at if we want to get the bond measure on the November ballot. So we are working on the resolution right now. That is back. We've done our part on the city side. It's back with our bond attorney to finish up. We plan on bringing that to council on May 23rd. And we're looking at, if council approves that, then we just start working on the behind the scenes stuff for the financing. You'll see the schedule here. That starts in October. And then it'll hit the ballot on November 8th. So we're moving full speed ahead. Like I said, council wanted to bring it back, so that's what we're doing, and we'll we'll have more information to share as it gets closer. Probably the next finance committee meeting, we'll have the actual resolution and things like that to share, but this is just kind of a very high level overview of what we anticipate the police bonds looking like through the end of the year.
Quick question. We don't know, the city doesn't have to obligate to a specific amount at this point, right?
We do. So that'll be in the actual resolution. The resolution cites exactly what the bond measure will say, which goes on the ballot. So we have to cite the term, which internally we're looking at 20 years because the numbers look good. And we also have to cite a total amount, which right now we're looking at 12 million with, just considering some cost inflation in there over the next few years. But we do have to lock down both the years and the amount before we can get it on a ballot. Any other questions? And like I said, I'll bring more information to the next finance committee meeting with actual, what it'll look like, the numbers, things like that. This was just kind of a, hey, this is coming up at the end of May. Other questions? Sarah's here to go through ARPA.
So as of right now, we have obtained council responses and Q&A. I've received responses from Mr. Hartman, Ms. Sprague, Mr. Noble, and Mr. Peterson. Others either didn't respond or reply that they had no suggestions. We've obtained suggestions or requests from boards and committees. We did a final call for city departments. Their request should be in by tomorrow. The mayor, Scott, Angie, and myself are striving towards an allocation period at budgeting for the 23-24 biennium. This ensures that we have identified all unmet needs and can incorporate into the budget process for efficiency. And we will also receive the second tranche of funding next month. I'm not quite sure of the date on that yet. And so the analyzed in December, and that was quite different than what we were originally going off of the interim rule. Things that they had considered as projects for governmental services were listed in revenue reduction. Some of those were filtered out and taken to stand alone or applied to different silos of funding and becoming allowable. Through the reporting process and further research and working with other entities, less than $10 million in funding can opt for a standard allowance for revenue reductions and claim up to $10 million in revenue reductions. The Department of Treasury reiterated that there is absolutely no benefit to entities receiving less than $10 million to not claim that standard allowance. So that changed kind of the scope that we were going towards and what was allowable versus unallowable in the interim rule that are now allowable under the final rule. So I was able to go back through the original list submitted by council and identify those costs that were not necessarily allowable under, revenue reduction that are now more allowable, like crosswalks and infrastructure and ambulances, police vehicles, things like that, that would have not been allowable under the interim rule. And the Department of, again, Treasury reiterated that there is no benefit to entities receiving funds less than $10 million to not claim it under that standard allowance, because they are going to assume that it's reduction in revenue anyways. We don't have to do any calculations. We don't have to submit any calculations, and it broadens the scope in which we can actually apply this money towards. Although the standing trend is restrooms, boy hut ditch, and outdoor spaces and accessibility is what it seems to be thus far. So the departments are wrapping up getting their final cost estimates in, and we will have that in a package ready to present for budgeting. So that way we can include it during the budget cycle. I mean, that's right around the corner. So we would actually be budgeting for for both tranches, not just one. Last time, and I guess I could have highlighted it, but what I did was I just moved our closed grants for this past fiscal year into the inactive section, so we can monitor those as we move forward. And I added in the ARPA state library funds from 2021 and the Transportation Improvement Board funding. We also have the Shoreline Master Plan update added in there that we got in this year. We don't have really any real updates aside from progress on these grants. If you notice, I included the 2022 balance moving forward, and then just notes alongside the inactive were returned due to pandemic for the No Child Left Inside and whatnot. So nothing has really changed that hasn't already gone to council. I guess I would just be open to taking questions if you have any questions about these. The only real change would be in 2022 is the addition of the Shoreline Master Plan update grant. All of the items in inactive that you see closed, those grants have been closed out and their period of performance has ended. So the airport improvement program for the environmental assessment for obstruction removal, that is complete and been drawn down. The COVID-19 assistance to firefighters supplemental, that is the first round of PPE that the firefighters received. They have completed those purchases and that has been closed out. Provider relief fund, that was a refund from EMS services and ambulance services that came in and was added to revenues for EMS. National Criminal History Improvement Program, I apologize, it's called NCHIP. That is for the second electronic fingerprinting equipment located in the PD, and that was purchased and completed. And then the Assistance to Firefighters 2018, that was for the power lift cots and loaders, and that was finalized in March. They purchased the last of the equipment for those, and that has been finally reported and drawn down. So those are all closed.
So if it says closed, that means we've received like the power cots, we've received them now?
Yes, that's a parameter of grant requirement. On site, closed and done. So there's no more reporting due. There is no funds remaining out there. They will all be received by the city.
And then if you've annotated by saying COVID-19, that means that the funding came from one or another, either CARES or something else, correct?
It's a requirement that we note that separately. So
right.
Happening in our accounting system, but I wanted to ensure that it was happening on this grant list as well.
Okay.
If it's in the inactive file, it means it has either been returned, such as like in 2019, we could not utilize that No Child Left Inside funding because of the pandemic. So that's noted on the far right. We don't necessarily need to see that, but status when we no longer have anything to do with the grant. We are completely closed out of it.
Okay.
Okay. Robert.
Yeah, that's what I was waiting for. Just scroll down to see which one it was. All right, STIP or Rosen?
And the erosion analysis is first. I don't think we had a handout for that one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, this is just an update on the Oyhut Bay erosion analysis project. We've concluded negotiations with Mott McDonald, the consultant that would be performing the study. It's a grant funded project. It's a $150,000 budget. There's not a city match. And so our intent is to bring the contract with Mott McDonald to council for award on the 9th.
Right.
Anything to add? Okay. But in any case, this has been before the Public Works Committee, and we wanted to bring here to see if there are any questions or any information you'd like us to include in the award packet. Okay, so
So
this,
could you enlarge it?
yeah, okay. So I would just didn't necessarily intend to go through this item by item. We can. But I just wanted to kind of refresh everybody on the 6-year transportation and improvement plan or program. It's brought to council every year to be updated and approved by resolution. It is also referenced, invoked by reference essentially in our comprehensive plan. So we don't list all these individual wish list projects in our comp plan. We just reference our STIP so that things stay flexible from year to year. What being on this list does is it kind of enhances a project's grant eligibility for a transportation-based grant. So the project list here is the same project list that was brought to council last year. The only changes that I made was to change some of the costs. So a couple just stayed the same because that's what we budget every year for certain items. Those are, I think, are the first two at the top. And then if I had an updated cost estimate for a particular project, I would actually do a more detailed change on what that costs now in today's dollars with new information. The only project that was updated in that manner was the Safe Routes to School project, because I recently updated the estimate for that project. The remainder of them were increased from last year per the WashDOT's construction cost index from 21 to 2022 was about 7.5% increase. Normally I'm increasing that 3% every year. This year it was 7.5% for inflation. And then the other change I made in this sheet is typically we've been presenting it without the kind of verbose description of each project. But I thought in this case that I would bring that in here. So if there was discussion points, that text is taken directly out from what I input onto the state database. That's the project. There that I wanted to talk about, and is just there is a lot of time that goes into for me to update on the state database will take me almost a day. So literally, if I was to move a project from priority 20 up to priority 3, it's a lot of work. So I try to get input ahead of time to see what the questions are about the individual projects, see if there's things that we want to add or take away. So going forward, this will go to the Public Works Committee, the same sheet. And then we'll put out a public notice this month that it's going to be, it's public meeting will be the first and second meetings in June. And then I've got to have it updated on the state database by June 30th. Are there any questions?
I have, you might not be surprised, I have a couple. The number 12 is the Mount Olympus Bridge replacement. And with the infrastructure bill that passed the federal legislature, there's been, I believe, the transfer of funds to the state now. Are we applying for funds to replace the Mount Olympus Bridge? And I think the Albatross Bridge is also below the 50% grading system that the Society of Engineers uses.
Yeah, I ran the last program that came through as far as available money. I ran that through Sergeant Engineers, who does our timber bridge inspections. What they informed me, I'm not sure if it's 50%. I thought it was a 40% rating. But what they told me is that our timber bridges don't currently qualify for replacement. So right now I'm not pursuing any funding to replace any of the bridges because they simply don't.
And then I guess my second question, although I'm not happy with that answer, I think we do have bridges that should be replaced, whether they meet that threshold or not. I know they're in D- to F scoring, I would put. But what are we doing with the pavement, with the road repairs this year? I don't remember. I see there's money being spent, but I don't remember where we are with the pavement preservation for this year or the any road repairs.
So pavement preservation is under item 1 on the SNP.
Yes.
This was discussed at the last Public Works Committee. So we're aware that we've got a TBD report for 2021 that we'll be bringing to council this year. And based on the discussions with as far as pavement repairs, the work items that we discussed at the Public Works Committee were crack sealing. So that is something that's actively in process. We discussed road sealing on the fence as to whether I'm going to bring a road sealing project forward this year. And the reason is that the number of suppliers is extremely limited. My opinion is it's a half measure. We should be chip sealing. People don't want to hear chip sealing, but I would also like to not be paying a, name your dollar amount in 10 years to be repaving a lot of roads. So, but I'm doing some investigation into road sealing. We did bring one to contract to council last year. It wasn't awarded, so we turned around and did some more conventional treatments. So what I do know is what we'll be proposing is crack sealing for sure. I'm still seeing if the suppliers are available to do road sealing. It'd be a similar contract to what was done last year, or was proposed last year, which was, I believe, I want to say Pacific, Ocean Lake Way, Taurus, and Polaris. It was around a $280,000 contract to do those. And then as far as on the conventional side, we've got the bridges you mentioned, the asphalt needs to be repaired. So the Olympus Bridge is due for a mill out. The Overlake Bridge is due for it's just got to be replaced.
So it's getting a little late in the year. What is it, the turnaround for an RFP, about 6 weeks? We're going to be pushing it to get work done on this sort of thing before winter. right? If it doesn't go out soon. And I'm seeing that we're significantly below our spending on the streets and on the TBD below our appropriations.
Yeah, I can't speak to any familiarity with those exact numbers, but we put work out to council, I think, in the beginning of July last year, so there's still time.
Okay,
You're also missing a public works director.
yeah, I understand that.
I'm doing everything I can to get stuff out to bid. But it's noted, yeah, there is a weather window on this work, and if we don't hit the weather window, we don't do the work. So my understanding is also this, the money rolls over to next year, so we're not losing money.
I was gonna add something too. I listened to some council people in the past and other residents that talk about pavement preservation priorities and discussing Ocean Shores Boulevard and its condition. And I just try to remind folks, and I'm sure you think about it too, as we get moving forward with the jetty rehabilitation, those trucks will be using Ocean Shores Boulevard, crushing the crud out of them. And I would hate for us to see at this point, us using our own money to do anything to Ocean Shores Boulevard, when I'm praying that as we get further along with the jetty preservation, that maybe the feds will help us a little bit with our road reconstruction after the work is done.
Yeah, I've heard the same stories from the last time work was done. And I mean, I have the same concerns. My preference would be that the trucks were running in the summer. Fortunately, that coincides with the tourist season, but those trucks on those roads when the groundwater table is high isn't ideal. Neither are overloaded trucks on the roads. The wear and tear on the asphalt is exponential. But on the other hand, I just don't know if that's within operational control for public work. Aware of the project, and I know that there were problems last time.
Yeah, so I'll have a lengthier city administrator report that will deal with non-financial issues when we come to council back on Monday. But just on the finance side, and speaking strictly to that, you saw the numbers already. There's just not a lot to add, but on the whole, we're still seeing increases in everything from what Angie said, with the exception of our building permits. And there's some other bigger macro trends that obviously we want to keep an eye on. Several banks, including Deutsche Bank, has come out and said that a recession is likely and probably even needed in order to stem inflation. So we'll be sort of watching that. There's obviously, large inflationary pressures within the economy, with the cost of gas and then everything associated with the supply chain. And the other thing that we're seeing in Ocean Shores that is not necessarily the city per se, but it will impact us long term, is that housing prices have started to come down. We're starting to see reductions in housing prices by between 5 and 10%, and homes are staying on the market more for longer periods of time. So I know the real estate agencies, and talking to them, they're still doing well. There's no panic, but that peak period that we had last year may be gradually coming to an end. And there's the possibility that with interest rates rising, which is almost bound to happen now, we're going to see some economic contraction within the city. Again, nothing that we're not prepared for, but just some long-term trends with it. And employment within Grace Harbor still remains, nationally it's 3.8. We're down to, I think, about 5.6 here, which is the lowest we've ever had in Grace Harbor. But there's not a lot of additional workforce members out there to bring into the workforce. Pretty much everyone who's employable is basically employed at this point. So just, nothing to panic about. Our numbers still look good. But that kind of 2 really beautiful years that we had was just a blessing for everything. That might be slowly mitigating over the course of next year. Obviously, something we'll keep an eye on.
So, and I would just, yeah, we're seeing, prices coming down, but I also would, make an argument that people have overpriced their houses.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Because they're
it's,
seeing it.
it's
So-
peak, definitely.
So it's like, they're still selling at dramatically higher than they were before. It just, everybody thinks that anything's worth the $500,000. I mean, so, but it's something that we need to look at as far as our, whole financial one. One of the things that we're working on right now, we don't have a solution, and it's obviously the High Dune Trail. We're running into some roadblocks there, and that has to do with some funding. But I have possible options are, so we don't know where that is. I'm still optimistic that we can get it done. But there could be a possibility of some type of changes, you know, and because we have to make the decision or we lose funding. Just to have a heads up for you guys, so you're not surprised as we work through this, but again, we're working on that. And then I know that we'll probably have much more discussions when it comes to the police station. And just because the number that we're putting out there is not necessarily the number that we are going to be obligated to, because we can turn money back in. We don't have to take the full amount, but our discussion that we had on coming up with that number is what is a realistic number, so we don't go out for bid and find out we don't have enough money to pay for whatever we're going to pay. So more on the high side, because there's nothing, in my mind, the worst thing to do is we pass it and find out that we don't have enough money to do whatever we're going to do. And then there's additional funding that we're looking for from the legislature, and we will bring forward to the council on properties that we have that are available. So we're working on this stuff. I'm optimistic to get things done, but again, it's going to be what the council wants us to do, that we'll move forward. But the bond, we're really on a tight time frame. If we're gonna hit November, because if we don't hit November, then the whole thing slides back. So that's kind of where we are. Got any questions?
I have a question about, you mentioned the High Dune Trail before losing funding, you said. When does the funding have to go back if we don't move forward?
My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that we have two types of funding, or actually three fundings. We've got the city funding, which is obviously no problem. Then we have commerce, which is from the state, which they are much more flexible, whatever they're doing. And then federal, which is very restrictive. We have a goal of right away by the end of June. So actually, we need to be able to move forward at the beginning of June, because we've got paperwork that we have to put in. So that's kind of where we're looking at. And again, we're on the phone talking to people to see if there's options that we can go. So there's nothing that's there, but there's a time frame that we're working on.
Right.
So
Okay.
trying to get it done.
Okay.
Yeah, I would hate to see, with the amount of work and emphasis and support that's behind the High Dune Trail, to lose it based on, some of the things that are going on. That would be not a good thing, I don't think.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm still optimistic. We are working on setting up some meetings and do it. And I think I personally think there's a pathway forward that works for all parties to be involved. That's the approach that we're taking, and we're utilizing our consultant to work on the negotiation piece of it. And so I'm thinking it's all going to work out, but I just there's a lot of stuff that's been out there, so I just wanted to be upfront of what we're working on.
Yeah, I also appreciate, the police station thing. We don't want to be in the same boat that Cosmopolis is in, where they had $3 billion and it's probably half what they need now. So that's it.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I just want to let you know, on the May 17th, I'm going to be in Tucson for business, so I won't be able to make that meeting. Just FYI.
Must be nice.
Finally get to travel again. I'm happy.
You guys taking time out of your busy day to join us.
Thank you.